Welcome to this on-demand session with NCEA. My name is Melody Wittenbach, and I'm the Executive Director of the Roach Center for Catholic Education.
And my name is Hosman Ospino, and I am an associate professor of theology and religious education at Boston College School of Theology and Ministry.
And today we'll be discussing a recent national report that we published titled Cultivating Talent, Examining Pathways for Catholic Hispanic Educators in Our Catholic Schools. This study came out of a 2016 report that was published by Dr. Ospino and Dr. Patricia Wetzel O'Neill, where they examined how Hispanic families are engaged in Catholic schools and how we as educators can best support students and their families while they're enrolled. This report demonstrated some really critical findings for us as Catholic educators, including how do we create hospitable environments, how do we welcome parents in the community and in the life to best support their students, and how do we shift our instructional practices to best serve a multilingual, multicultural group of students. That report was published in 2016, and our study is an extension of this report, where we really begin to examine more deeply how are Hispanic educators involved in the life of the school, in the communities that they serve, and how are they trained and educated and supported as they develop into leaders and in service to their community. This report you can find a publication of on our Roach Center website, and it is also available during the NCA conference that you hopefully will be attending in April.
Well, for all of us to understand this report, it would be important to understand the context, the larger context of why we need to pay attention to Hispanic leadership in the Catholic Church. It is not a secret, as we all know, that the church in the United States of America is being reshaped, transformed at various levels by the growing presence of Hispanic Catholics. Now, many people sometimes wonder why so many Hispanics at this particular point. At what point they would start talking about Hispanic ministry and so forth. 40, 50 years ago, Hispanics or Hispanic children in families, teachers, educators were not a priority for Catholic schools. And now, why are we shifting our attention? The reason or the answer to that question is demographics. But we also need to keep in mind that Latinos have been in the United States of America for about 5 centuries, at least in this territory, preceding even the foundation of the United States. So the fact that we were not as concerned about the Hispanic presence in schools, in a sense, points to a blind spot in our history and also lack of anticipation of the changes in the cultural demographic dynamics that would be defining or redefining Catholic schools, Catholic education in the United States. So in some ways, we seem to be doing a bit of remedial work in a lot of our Catholic institutions, parishes, dioceses, apostolic movements, organizations, national organizations, Catholic schools, Catholic colleges and universities, even Catholic seminaries. And the more we understand the demographics, the more we understand the changes, the better we will prepare for the present and the future. If we take the entire Catholic population in the United States of America, we know that about 43% of all Catholics in this country self-identify as Hispanic. We also know that the younger the population in the Catholic Church, the chances are that more and more will self-identify as Hispanic. So we know that about 60% of all Catholics under 18 in this country are Hispanic. So what does that mean? That the present and the future of Catholicism in the United States of America will continue to be defined by this particular presence. And in the rest of this century, much of what we say about U.S. Catholicism we will be saying it about the Hispanic Catholic presence. Now, institutions sometimes change fast, but sometimes refuse change, sometimes respond slowly to the many dynamics that are affecting them, whether it is geopolitics or migration, economic dynamics, or simply cultural changes. And we have to acknowledge that Catholic schools in general in our country have responded rather slowly to the demographic changes. There have been many steps forward, but when we look at the fast changes, in terms of the growing presence of the, Hispanics, the immigrant dynamics that are reshaping neighborhoods and parishes and dioceses, our Catholic schools still resemble very much what Catholic schools were 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, not only in their administration, but also in their curriculum and also the population that is being served. So we need to continue to imagine what could be the best Catholic schools. And this is where the study that we have been doing with the Roche Center for Catholic Education in 2016 and now 2022 are inviting us to imagine how do we respond. And looking at Catholic schools, as Melody was indicating, we need to make sure that we create strong environments for families and Hispanic children. But at the same time, we need to ensure that we got the appropriate leadership. I have encountered, Melody, many educators and pastoral leaders who tell me, I don't speak Spanish. I don't know how to work with the Latino community. Maybe my school cannot serve this community. And the answer that I always give is, well, you don't have to do it all. We got an army of Latinos, Latinas out there who are willing to support, to engage. There are 60 million Hispanics, actually more than 60 million Hispanics in the United States of America. And of those 60 million, about 32 million self-identify as Roman Catholic. So if we don't find teachers in 32 million people in this country, about half and half born in the country and the other half immigrant. So then we really need to reconsider what is it that we are doing. Well, in this study, we looked closely at the Latino teachers in the United States of America. We know that there are about 15,000 or so Hispanic teachers and leaders in Catholic schools, which constitute about 9% of the entire teacher leader education body of leaders and educators in the universe of Catholic schools. 15,000. We wanted to learn more about that. And then, Melody, why don't you tell us a little bit about the methodology?
Mm-hmm. So how we tried to capture the voices of those 15,000 individuals was a kind of a variety of ways. So first, a survey that went out nationally. And we sent this out to over 10,000 educators in Catholic schools in the hopes that both Hispanic and non-Hispanic, in the hopes that our non-Hispanic educators would also send this out to some of those that were in their schools and their dioceses that are working that are Hispanic. We were able to have over 300 individuals participate in the survey, in focus groups, and interviews. We knew it was really important that we allowed Hispanic educators to give voice to what they're experiencing in their everyday. And so a variety of focus groups were held, one-on-one interviews with our research team, which was comprised of myself, Hoffsman, Dr. Elena Sada, who leads our twin two-way immersion network of schools, Dr. John Reyes, who is our Director of Research and Program Evaluation and Innovation, and Dr. Michael O'Connor, who's the Director of Outreach for the Roche Center. So our team really collaborated in trying to capture as many voices as possible for this study. We went through all the proper institutional review board. We had held all the data confidentially on our Qualtrics survey. And so through the process of this data collection, and we really looked nationally, it was fascinating to see where we received the variety of responses from. We captured voices from the Midwest, from New England, but we saw a heavier predominance from the areas in the Southwest and Southeast. So cities like Miami, Dallas, Los Angeles, where we saw a higher frequency of responses from. And so after coding those studies, we have a variety of findings, and we're going to focus today on 4 key ones that we want to share with you that we'll dive a little bit more deeply on.
Very good. So when one looks at the report that emerged from this study, there are about 60 pages of hardcore data, and we can have entire conversations about each one of those pages and all the thoughts that emerged there. But as Melody said, no, let's focus on 4 of these. I want to highlight 2. The first one that I want to highlight that was interesting as we went through conversations, gathering data, the surveys and so on, is to acknowledge the fascinating dynamics when it comes to intercultural competencies of the Hispanic teachers and leaders in Catholic schools. Let's unpack this a little bit more. We know that in a culturally diverse church, intercultural competencies are important. Why? Because they allow us to not only respond, but also maximize the potential of diversity in our schools. So diversity is not a problem to be solved. And that's something to keep in mind, okay? So we don't have Catholic schools or Hispanic ministries or multicultural ministries, so we solve diversity. We have these ministries and these experiences so we can unpack and we can actually take advantage of the richness that these spaces that are diverse bring to us. Well, when we look at Hispanic teachers and leaders in Catholic schools, these intercultural competencies are manifested in various ways. For instance, the vast majority of these teachers are bilingual, which is a very important dynamic today. Why is bilingualism and biculturalism important? Because many of the families that are sending their children to Catholic schools actually are bilingual families, de facto bilingual families, just by being immigrants in the United States, many of these Hispanic families. So what these teachers do is they create a welcoming environment for those families so they can feel at home, so they can feel that they can participate. But also, these teachers, based on our study, raised important awareness about symbols, language, prayers, rituals, resources that otherwise would not be addressed in the curriculum or in the life of the school, and thus help the school to be more inclusive of the different perspectives, experiences, and questions that families and children from non-white Euro-American communities bring to the life of the school. But it's not only how friendly the teachers could be to the families or how welcoming they can be to the families. When it comes to intercultural competencies, one of the biggest influences of these teachers is the fact that they can shape curriculum. They can actually expand the vision of the curriculum in many ways. For instance, when speaking of history, when speaking of science, when speaking of religion, these teachers bring from their own wells, from their own cultural wells, experiences that they have had and that they are more aware. Let's imagine that we have a lesson on war, or a lesson on displacement, or a lesson on migration. These teachers actually have, many of them have experienced some of this, or know personally people who have experienced some of this. And that enriches the curriculum, We don't have to imagine social justice commitments as something, that happens out there, and then maybe we're gonna get out of our own ways in order to respond to this. These bilingual, bicultural, multicultural, interculturally competent teachers, through their experience, their personal experiences, enrich the curriculum and they make it personal. Another way in which we can look at this intercultural competence dynamic emerging from our study is that these teachers actually expand our understanding of who we are as a society and who we are as a society in the context of the larger world. We know that about 40% of teachers who are Hispanic teaching in Catholic schools are immigrant. That means that these teachers, in many ways, help us to develop in our Catholic school context an understanding of geopolitics or an understanding of the global world that does not come just from books or videos, but once again, these people are, or these leaders are bringing this out of their own personal experience and commitment. So intercultural competence, is important because it's not just about knowledge of something that we don't know about, but intercultural competence is about values that shape who we are and how we educate. And they shape our pedagogy, our commitment, and our sensibilities. Catholic schools that have a significant number of Hispanic teachers and leaders are schools that tend to be more attentive to the dynamics that are affecting the lives of the families of the children who are going there, are more attentive to global issues, and they tend to be more attentive to connecting social justice dynamics to the experiences of these families. And that leads me to the second point, because that attentiveness, that sensibility, as a matter of fact, points to a fresher way of looking at advocacy. Catholic schools in general are bastions of social justice conversations. And it's one of the characteristics that identifies Catholic education in the United States. We don't shy away from speaking about social justice inspired in the gospel, inspired in the best of our theology, inspired in the best of our spirituality. And then Catholic schools, have clear commitments when it comes to social justice. Many of our schools have immersion trips. Many of our schools join pro-life rallies. Many of our schools look at questions related to poverty and, for instance, discrimination, race in society. These Hispanic teachers are very much aware of these dynamics and actually embrace them as well. But what we discovered also in our study is that Hispanic teachers and leaders in Catholic schools take advocacy to a next level, to a step forward. And for instance, we know that Hispanic teachers and educators tend to advocate more intentionally and in a more engaged way about questions of immigration, questions related to housing, questions related to labor, questions that are related to the reality of immigrant adjustment in the context of society. These teachers, because they know the families of the students in these places, they know the struggles that these families are going through. And sometimes, when we look at questions like racism or life or war or poverty, these are macro level dynamics. But Hispanic teachers, in many ways, help us in our schools to look at the micro level expressions of the same dynamics, but connected to the lives of the family. And they themselves actually become advocates. We found fascinating that the majority of these teachers actually advocate, writing letters to senators or congresspeople. They become engaged in advocacy in their neighborhood. They want better neighborhoods, understanding that a better neighborhood is good, not only for the school, but for the families of the teachers the families of the children that they are teaching. So these two dynamics are key that emerged, and we were fascinated and actually very pleased to find the contributions of these teachers. Intercultural Competencies, Advocacy.
And starting with those two are a perfect segue into exploring further how do they come to this vocation. So we know what they're capable of doing in their school communities through these intercultural competencies and the many assets that they bring, but then also the impact that they can have in their wider communities through the advocacy and what they're striving for a better world for all. You know, when we look at the profile of the Catholic school teachers, and so I'm going to take a look at what is their motivation for this call to teach or to lead in Catholic schools, and then secondly, how are they trained? Where are they formed? Where are they receiving their degrees? So I'll dive a little bit more deeply into those two findings of ours in this part. So to begin with, the profile of our teachers really was interesting. There are 7% of our Catholic school leaders are Hispanic and 9% are teachers. Our teachers bring such a gift to the classrooms every day, and they're sometimes encouraged, right, to take on additional responsibilities. Many times they serve as cultural ambassadors, they translators, interpreters, so they use their natural assets and gifts that they have from their own personal upbringing to best support their school. And oftentimes these are talents that are tapped just because of the need that exists. It isn't something that is part of their specific role responsibilities. They do this because they know that they want to better connect with the families to better serve their school environments. And so they'll often interpret documents, translate for families at school conferences when a family can't understand. So these are things that teachers naturally do. And oftentimes they begin to exercise that leadership capacity if it's organizing parents around certain events or, again, taking on different administrative roles. But it's interesting that 7% of our leaders are Hispanic and only 2% of our superintendents are of Hispanic descent. So we're seeing kind of a discrepancy as we get higher up, fewer and fewer numbers. And this is something that we really want to draw attention to because we know that there are dynamic, incredible leaders. And we have to ask ourselves, why so few at these high positions, especially when the demographic shifts are such that there's an abundance of individuals that could be tapped for these roles. And we know that it's critical when we think a little bit about their motivation. What is that call to teach? Why does one discern, giving of service to a Catholic school community? And many of it is driven because of their deep faith and their values. So of those that we surveyed and participated in the different interviews, 97% were of Catholic descent. So they're deeply faith-filled. They bring an incredible witness to the life of Christ through their own actions and to expressing the gospel with the students. And so it's an important thing to think that they're really driven by their faith. It's their faith that drives them, and they feel a deep opportunity and an ability to connect with their students and sharing their faith in the classrooms in the school community. And the same with the leaders. The leaders and the teachers also demonstrated an incredible commitment. We were surprised to see that they had over about, on average, 16 years of service in our Catholic schools. So they truly fall in love with the community. They want to be of service. They stay for a number of years. And in this time where we see so much dynamism in our human capital with such turnover, we really have to think a little bit about how do we retain talent? How are we keeping talent? And I think this group of individuals that we surveyed and participated in our study are really an example of what's possible to kind of commit to a community and transform it. Additionally, when we think a little bit about that nudge to teach, so many of them were encouraged by their own family members. Family members saw gifts in them, other teachers saw gifts in them, and many of them attended Catholic schools themselves. About 70% of our survey participants indicated that they themselves attended Catholic schools. So there was a seed that was planted early on, which is a beautiful thing to think a little bit about. If you are a teacher or a leader in a Catholic school now, how can you begin to plant that seed for potential future teachers, right? Helping them to see, wow, you would make a great teacher. You would make a great leader one day. I hope you could come and be this third grade teacher in this classroom one day because you'd be amazing. So just different words that may stay with a child like that, that they want to then come back and be of service maybe to their former school community or another Catholic school community. Additionally, one of the beautiful things that was interesting to see, and it was a little bit of a discrepancy in our study, was that when it came to the survey, we asked, are you motivated to serve in a Catholic school because of your own personal identity, your background being Hispanic? Does that motivate you to want to teach in a Catholic school? And fewer of them said that that was a motivating factor. But in almost every single one of our interviews and focus group studies, we heard people say that I am doing this because I want to be a role model for my students. Many of them noted how that this vocation was about kinship, about accompaniment, that they wanted to be that role model for the children that they were serving, especially the Hispanic children, and other children too, widely, so that they get a very diverse interdisciplinary understanding of the world. That they did that because they felt that they themselves didn't have that opportunity as a student to see that there were, people who looked like them in the movies. They never had a teacher who looked like them. And so now here they are shifting that culture and shifting that experience for so many children. And then finally, when it comes to the training of our Catholic Hispanic educators, given that we have so many wonderful institutions of Catholic higher education across the country, one would think that a good number of Catholic educators are being formed in these institutions. Unfortunately, that's not the case when it comes to the undergraduate education experience. Only 27% indicated that they received their degrees from an institution of Catholic higher ed. When it came to leadership, we saw a bigger percentage. So about 46% of individuals received a graduate degree in leadership at one of our Catholic institutions. And this is because colleges like Boston College, University of Notre Dame, Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles have very specific programs for leadership and that is tailored to service in Catholic schools. So this is very interesting for us to be attentive to, and it's a real call to action for us as Catholic educators in higher institutions of higher ed to think about how are we widening that pipeline? How are we inviting more Hispanic individuals into this beautiful ministry of Catholic education?
And I think that now that you mentioned a call to action, then in listening to these insights about emerging from the study and about Catholic school teachers and leaders who are Hispanic, many of us might be asking ourselves, well, so what? I mean, what do we do here? What's next? Or how do we react? The first call to action is you got to read the report. That's key. Because that's gonna be the only way in which you and Melody and I, our team, and others are gonna be actually engaged in this conversation. But when we ask ourselves, what is it that we need to be paying attention? What are the nuances that this study is calling for? Or calling to? I'm going to mention two. And actually, they connect significantly with what you were saying. There's a regular question that we hear everywhere, when we engage superintendents, bishops, principals, and others interested in supporting a pipeline of teachers in Catholic schools. And what's fascinating is that the question is, where are the teachers? Where are the Hispanic teachers? We're looking for them and we don't find them. We really work hard and so on. And yes, I grant you that if you're a Hispanic teacher watching this, most likely you're in high demand, or if you're a Hispanic leader, you are in high demand because there aren't that many, that actually, or many Hispanics that are considering or have been invited into this. However, there's plenty out there that we may not have invited yet, But I think that the key to the question is we should have begun asking this question in the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s. By the 1980s and early 90s, we knew demographically that the church in the United States of America was going to shift quickly towards the Latino population in terms of demographics. We knew that. The trends were there. But many of our institutions chose to kind of wait and see, okay? 40 years later, fast forward, we find ourselves in a largely Hispanic church, but unfortunately, not enough Hispanic teachers and leaders that are considering this. And one of the reasons is, as Melody indicated, the majority of these teachers were students themselves in Catholic schools. So I think that that's the first question that we need to start asking. The question when it comes to where do Hispanic teachers will come from or where are they coming from, The answer is in your classrooms. I really invite everyone to look at your own schools and see what percentage of your students self-identify as Hispanic, Latino, or how many of them come from Hispanic families, because it's very likely that the next generation of teachers is going to come precisely from those young women and men who are sitting in your classrooms. If we don't increase enrollment, if we don't support families that are Hispanic in our Catholic schools, then we're going to have exactly the same conversation 30, 40 years from now. But this is the time to start planning for Catholic schools in the year 2050. 30 years from now, we need to start educating the teachers at this point that are going to be teaching there. And in the meantime, well, we continue to encourage. We need to continue to encourage. And the second call to action that I want to highlight, based on what we've been discussing, is how do we affirm Hispanic teachers and leaders in our Catholic schools? No, it's not rare sometimes for leaders to say, well, but that teacher is an immigrant, but that teacher speaks with an accent. And speaking with a strong accent, being an immigrant, I always ask, who doesn't speak with an accent anyway? No, but the question here is that sometimes being bilingual, being an immigrant, being someone who speaks 2 or 3 languages, is still perceived, and it's mind-boggling if you think about it. It's still perceived as a deficit, no? And we gotta change that. How are you embracing the gifts of these Hispanic teachers by being bilingual? Some of them actually speak 3 or 4 languages, because some of them are speak Portuguese as well, or they might have lived in Europe and they developed another language skill while there. So how do we engage and affirm the gifts of this person? How do we we embrace the pedagogical dynamics, the pedagogical wisdom that these people bring from Latin America, from the Caribbean, from other parts of the world? But not only that, because we know that the majority of these Hispanic teachers and leaders are U.S. born, these women and men are de facto gente puente. They are already bridging. They already have that skill of being gente puente. It's natural to them. They most likely grew up in a bilingual home, and they already know how to negotiate these dynamics. So the question is, how are we affirming and embracing those gifts of these teachers and leaders?
And 2 additional findings as well that I think are calls to action that we need to consider, really centering in on what are we doing in our classrooms, in our school communities? Are we embracing those assets of bilingualism, multiculturalism that in our classrooms in ways where we're honoring that? So thinking a little bit about how are we innovating what we're doing in our Catholic schools that will be a draw for families and Hispanic teachers. The 2A immersion network of schools that we operate out of the Roche Center for Catholic Education, that's led by Dr. Elena Sada, right now comprises of 22 Catholic schools across the country, from Los Angeles to New York to Miami. I mean, they're all over, and they're kind of beginning to be examined and thought about. Could we adopt a dual language preschool program in our schools? And then how do you do that in a way that really kind of centers those gifts and then draws in and invites many more Hispanic educators in ways that allows them to give of their talents, to give of the many gifts that they have to that community? Additionally, I think we need to be considering about how are we really training more for our Catholic schools, more individuals, right? So right now we have our traditional programs, right? Our education programs, our master's degree programs, but I think we need to be thinking more innovatively and outside the box. Yeah. We know that there are oftentimes very cohort models that kind of support one another in community, that can help one another get kind of through to graduation and accomplish those degrees. And so thinking about residency programs, programs that we see, like in Philadelphia, as we mentioned in the report, or even the Onward Leaders program in Los Angeles. That's another bright spot that we comment on. Having programs that are very intentional and very focused in developing community, helping to challenge people intellectually, but guiding them and really supporting them in that work as they're learning on the job, or even offering different professional development opportunities that can give people the skills that they may not have if they came from another degree. These are opportunities that we need to really kind of rethink and reconsider. How do we train our workforce? How do we train those? And how do we invite more into this vocation of Catholic education? And so there's a lot more in the report that we could discuss and a lot more challenges. I definitely would say take a look at the last few pages where we challenge you to think a little bit about how you can engage more deeply, what are the signs of hope, and kind of bring that kind of conversation to your school community or your archdiocese and expand this, because now is the time for us to really invent and reinvent and rethink about what our Catholic schools can and will be for the future.
Absolutely, Melody. And I think that, I mean, as you were speaking, I was just thinking there are so many challenges that I want to pose to our colleagues, in Catholic education watching this particular presentation. And I was really taken by the number you mentioned. Only 2% of superintendents of Catholic schools in the United States of America self-identify as Hispanic or have a Hispanic background, cultural background, ethnic. And I'm thinking, what are we doing in our schools to move the leadership pipeline, to foster leaders, to promote these teachers who are, or teaching Spanish or science, math, whatever it is that God called them to teach in these schools. And how do we move them into eventually leadership so they become principals, and from principals they start working at a different level. And we have to be more intentional. We got to question the idea of glass ceilings for many of these teachers, because it's concerning that the number of those right at the top tend to be not Hispanic, or not from minoritized communities. And that definitely should be a clarion call for anyone working in Catholic education. So I just want to give thanks to, first of all, thank you, Melody. It was a true pleasure to work with you on this project and on this study. And I know that this is not going to be the last study that we're going to work on, because there are many more areas that we need to continue to unpack. And it's a pleasure for us as Boston College to keep producing research that is creating conversations. And this is not only for, the conversation is not only for Catholic school teachers and leaders. Please engage your directors of Hispanic ministry in parishes and dioceses. Have conversations about this with your bishops. Have conversations about this with foundations, in your own region, in your own diocese, about what can be done. But also have conversations with the public school system, leaders, because this is something that sometimes we find ourselves in our Catholic schools in this little bubble. We just imagine that it's all about us and self-preservation. But partnerships with the Catholic school world and with the political world will be important. Let's be mindful that 94% of Hispanic children in the United States of America attend public schools. And most of these kids, give or take, quite likely self-identify or have a connection to Catholicism. So we need to also figure out ways, to encourage, these conversations. So as we train them, as we train teachers, as we engage teachers, we give them professional development and so on, they all receive the best possible resources. And we got, as a matter of fact, one opportunity to engage in this wider dialogue.
We do. So if you are curious to continue the conversation, October 2nd to the 4th here at Boston College, we'll be hosting a summit where we'll further unpack a number of these findings and dialogue more about what we can do to kind of shift the needle for our Catholic schools and engage more Hispanic teachers and leaders. And so we hope to see you there. And as always, check out the report. Do read that. And we hope that you can kind of bring that back to your school community. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Hospen, for your incredible partnership.
Thank you, Melody. Thank you, everyone. God bless you.